Why aren't your relationships improving in sobriety? We're going to talk about that today because when I was working in rehab and even when I went through myself, this was a common thing I saw with men. And I think it's just a problem that we have. It's a perception thing, so it's how we see the situation, but it's also a behavior thing. It's something that we do that perpetuates more of the problem. And so if we're unchecked and we go through life and we keep acting a certain way and it keeps producing a certain result and we don't stop and say, hey, why is this continuing to happen this way? We'll keep getting the same result and get frustrated. And then that's never a good thing for any of us in recovery because the solution is normally to go back to addiction, okay? So why aren't relationships improving? So when we're in addiction, we're living a certain way and we're just burning bridges, right? Because we're chasing a certain thing, we're behaving a certain way, everything is lining up for this one behavior. And I just remember in my addiction, I would always just do anything I could, whether that was steal the debit card from my family and take cash out, pawn some of my dad's tools, lie to them about where I was, whatever it was, I was always trying to manipulate them so that I could just keep going on in my addiction. So as long as I could push them off for one more day, I would do whatever it took. And that's how we manipulate people. And that's the reason is I want them to stay away from me, to give me some space so I can keep living the way I want, right? Well, we go into sobriety and we realize as we start sobering up, hey, I burnt a bunch of bridges, and we actually start to feel the emotions that come with that. We start to feel the pain of the relationships that we broke. The first piece of all this is just accepting that as reality. It's just accepting that that happened. Now, the big piece here is if we go forward and the only way that we feel like we can improve is if we make ourselves feel better about the relationships, we're going to have serious problems. Because if the only goal is that I feel better about this relationship, then I'm going to start doing the same thing that I did to feel like I could keep going on in my addiction. So if my goal, okay, so say I have a spouse, right? So spouse, if I want to feel like my spouse, my spouse wants me, right? Then in order to make that happen, I'm going to focus on behaviors that make it feel like that. And so I'm going to manufacture how I show up in the relationship because I want something to come towards me, okay? So say that's like you want to spend money or make them feel better, buy them nice things, take them on vacation, or just all that like those behaviors. If you're just trying to feel like that person wants you, then you are manufacturing who you are in order for that person to come back to you. And that's the same thing that happens in addiction, right? We're manufacturing who we are just to get what we want in that moment. Like we just want the money, or we just want the space, or we just want whatever, for them to leave us alone so that we can get back to what we want to do. So if we're always inserting some sort of behavior to make them want us, to emotionally feel like the relationship's getting better, we're just manipulating. That's all this is this is manipulation right here. We're trying to create a certain outcome because of what we're putting into it. Now, this is a destructive cycle, and I saw this so many times when I worked in rehab. Like men would come in and then they would be like, oh, I gotta, 3 months in, they'd be like, oh, I gotta leave, I gotta go fix things with my family. And I'm like, dude, it's a 12-month program. Like, you actually just need to finish the program. If you finish the program, that would be the best way to show that you care about your family because you're willing to do the internal deep work, right? But instead, what they would do is they would leave because they felt like they had to go emotionally fix it, right? And that's why emotions are things that we need to admit and recognize. Like we just need to recognize like, hey, I feel angry, or I feel sad, or I feel, whatever, lonely, whatever it is. We need to like feel those things. There's nothing wrong with feeling emotions. We're all human, we get those. The question is, once we recognize what the emotions are, how are we gonna lean into it, right? And so this is not a good situation. So what can we do differently to actually show up and end up fixing the relationships, okay? So let's do the same thing. So spouse, okay? So we can still say, wants me, okay? Okay, but instead of saying, how can I, make this person want me? The real question is, how can I become the person who is me? Okay? Because here's the most important part of all this. If you have to manufacture who you are for someone to want you, desire you, or like you, You're just setting yourself up for the same paradigm that got you into addiction. And a paradigm is the way we view reality, or a frame. You've heard me talk about frames before. If I frame reality as like, how can I manufacture who I am when I show up, then we get more of this stuff, okay? But when I say like, who am I? Like who am I as a person? What do I care about? All this type of stuff. That's why I like things like fitness or sport or whatever, because like once you get sober, you can go start working out. You could go play a sport. You could go read a book, or you could go do a certain type of activity that you enjoy. That's part of who you are, like something you already know about yourself that you already like. And then as you become more of that person, then that's the way that the spouse comes back, because most of the time people don't get in. There are people that get in a relationship because they're in addiction. And there's a reality where if your spouse was in addiction and you were in addiction and you got together, that you might not need to be with that person anymore. That's a deeper topic. It's more nuanced. It's not something that I'm really gonna cover, because you need to see someone else who can see you more regularly. But that is one situation. But most of the time, people, when they get into a marriage, they're normally not in addiction when they get into the marriage. So there's something about you that person was attracted to, and then you're attracted to them, right? So, but it's about being you. It's about being the person that you are. And so as you start to chase that person, then you start to feel like, hey, yeah, I'm myself, right? And the best story I have of this is my mom. I remember, I think with my mother-in-law and father-in-law, and they were talking, and she was like, yeah, the way that I knew Jonathan had changed was he just started confessing to stuff that I didn't even care about. Like he started saying, yeah, that was a lie, or I lied about that. The best story I have is we had this old circular table on our back deck, and I shot it with my BB gun because I learned that BBs ricochet. So I was like shooting it at like a slight angle so I could try to watch it ricochet. Well, it hit it and the glass shattered, and then boom, it fell through. And I was probably like 8. And I told my parents, like, oh, I don't know what happened. Maybe a stick fell on it from the oak tree, because we had this huge oak tree that, branches would fall off onto the deck. And then here I am, 24, 25 years old. And then my mom, we were laughing about it. And I was like, you know what, Mom? I actually shot that table with my BB gun. So it's like, I don't know, 16 years later. And I'm admitting to it. And then she was like, are you sure? I was like, yeah, Mom, I'm sure. I was a person that was there. Like, I shot it, right? And she said those were the things where she realized I had changed. She saw that consistently enough, but I wasn't doing that because I wanted my mom to feel better about me. I was doing that because I wanted to be that person where I was like, you know what, man, I just fess up to my stuff and I have a clear conscience, right? And I did that all the way back when I started in Teen Challenge the second time. So it was years of doing that before she admitted that in front of other people. But that's the point, is it's more about today being the person that you want to be. Like being this person, you can do that today, right? Like you can leave your past in the past, and we can say, all right, well, today, I'm going to do this thing, right? Like if something comes up and I need to confess to it, I'm just going to confess to it on the spot, just to get it off like your chest, just to be done with it, right? And that's, to me, the most freeing thing, is whenever you just say, yeah, this is the truth. And I don't know if I've ever had a moment in time where I've confessed something and the consequences or the what came from it was worse than how much better I felt. So you focus on becoming you, right? And then as you start to do that and get traction, 2 things happen. Number one, people, they'll want to come back in your life eventually. Sometimes things are so broken they have to go. That's a reality. But the most important part is, even if they don't come back, at least you're you, right? At least you're becoming this version of yourself that is going to be able to walk consistently in sobriety. And I can tell you 13 years later, like my life is tremendously different, and in good ways. Like there's so many good things that I don't want to give up and I want to keep. And they're a result of this part. It is no longer putting on a facade, not trying to manipulate things, like actually letting go of this desire to go fix everything. And instead just focus on me becoming the person that I want to be. So that's how you improve relationships, is you actually stop trying to fix it by manipulating it. You start trying to work on yourself, get real clear with who you want to be today, and take those actions. All right, guys, I'll see you next time.